I was put on antidepressants, I was put on benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, and I was taking about 2.5 to 3 sleeping pills a day.
Oh, wow.
I was a walking zombie. I don't even remember that part of my life.
I remember the first time that I went to Admission Ward 3, I was crying all time. I felt like a little kid, like I had nothing on me. I was still wearing my PJs.
Welcome to the She Word, where we have conversations that women rarely have but really should. I'm Sasha, your host for this edition of the She Word, the Young Women edition, where we are going to have conversations which are more related to a younger demographic. This episode is set to dive straight into young women and mental health. But before I go introducing our guests, I'd like to bring up some points and statistics. When it comes to women, 1 in 5 women experience a common mental health disorder, such as anxiety or depression, compared with 1 in 8 men. 47% of women were considered at high risk of developing mental health disorders, compared to 36% of men. 25.7% of young women have self-harmed, more than twice the rate of young men. And women are nearly twice as likely as men to be diagnosed with depression. With all this being said, let's dive straight into our show. I've invited 3 women which all share the mission of raising awareness about mental health, especially within the local sector. Be it through their own careers, art, or their social media presence, they are all passionate about shedding more light onto an otherwise often stigmatized topic. So without further ado, with me today I have Leah Vella, who is a psychology graduate who worked with Agius and Support for almost 2 years while she was getting her degree, and is currently working with the Richmond Foundation as a mental health recovery officer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a really honor to be here. I'm really excited for this. I don't know what to expect, but I'm really looking forward to see what comes up. It's a really interesting topic that can never get enough light on. So thank you for having me.
Agreed. And I think today is going to be a very powerful discussion that is going to be very fruitful to women out there.
For sure. I think everyone's experienced, I think at one point or another, everyone has experience with mental health. So to have the platform to talk about it, especially on the women's side, I think that's really interesting.
Amazing.
So thank you.
Amazing. Secondly, we have Emma Agius, the woman and artist whose story undoubtedly touched all of us and who is currently making a brilliant use of her art and social media as an outlet for coping and raising awareness.
Hi.
Hello, Emma.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for giving us the space to talk and speak up our mind.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be here. I'm very, very honored to have you on this table. And finally, Tiffany Camilleri, who is also a psychology graduate, but has now more into the marketing sphere, right? Who has often used her social media platform to speak out about mental health, and with a special focus on her journey getting off benzos. Like this is happening right now.
Yes.
Thank you for coming, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me. Again, it's a pleasure, as the others mentioned. I'm really glad to be here. So have the space and just like shed light on these topics. I feel like they really should be talked about more. Make it less of a taboo.
Yeah. And like we have the power to transform them, you know, into something which is more like out there. Like we shouldn't be ashamed of talking about these things, and that's important. So ladies, a massive welcome to you all on the show, and thank you for accepting the invitation to be here once again. So now, after I've just briefly introduced all of you, and before we delve into our discussion into mental health, I'd like you all to take a moment to introduce yourselves. Leah, you want to kick us off?
So I'm 22 years old. I've graduated last year. I have an honors degree in psychology, and I used to work as a support worker with Agius and Support, so people who have disabilities, and in the residential setting. And I currently work as a mental health recovery officer, which means I help people in the community, most people who have been to Mount Carmel or are resettling back into the community due to the mental health condition. I've also just been certified by Richmond as a mental health first aid instructor. So yeah, that's a little about me. My experience with mental health, I've experienced anxiety from a very young age and OCD as well. So I also have my own experience, and working in the sector, it's like you get your first-hand experience, but then you also have my personal side where I'm also the patient or the client
Yeah.
in that sense. So you get the best of both worlds in the way you understand what mental health is.
Exactly. And in a way, like, I guess it makes it easier for you to help others as well.
It makes it easier as well, but it also makes it a bit difficult because it can hit close to home with certain situations and with certain clients. There are some triggers, but it's always an honor to be able to have someone trust you enough to share that story with you, and in any insight that you may have that have helped you, maybe you can share that. I think that's the main point with mental health: sense of community and bringing people back together.
Amazing. Amazing. And that's exactly why we're doing this today.
Yes.
So thank you. Emma?
I'm 24 years old. I just got married.
Congratulations.
I've been in and out of Mount Carmel 6 times. Now it's been 2-3 months, and I'm feeling much, much better. I'm feeling very myself.
I'm so glad.
I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, chronic depression, anxiety, and PTSD because of the rape. That happened 15 months ago. It happened 15 months ago.
Wow, all right. It's been quite a while already now.
Yes.
Still very fresh.
Yeah.
Still very fresh, and
fresh.
nothing happened yet, so it's still very
Being prolonged.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, for sure.
And like we'll discuss that as well today, like especially with like the delays as well that there are with kind of like achieving justice, when it comes to these types of situations. So I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Tiffany, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm 24 years old. I graduated in psychology as well. I did work in the sector for about 2 to 3 years, but I felt like after a while it was becoming a bit too taxing on me personally. It was very, very rewarding being in the sector. Even, the fact that you're helping people, as Leah said, you're using your own insight with your own personal experience. It gives you that sort of like, I would say, a bit of an advantage because there are certain things that come naturally to you in terms of helping people and using your own coping mechanisms to teach them. But I felt like it was already a big responsibility to work on my own mental health. So I felt like helping others, as much as I love doing it and I still love doing it. I mean, it's very rewarding, but I felt like I wanted my career to be something other than psychology. So I decided to make a bit of a switch, and I've shifted onto marketing now. So I'm doing a distance learning course in strategic digital marketing, and it's going well.
So we actually have 2 marketeers on the table today, because
Yes.
that's what you do as well,
Yes,
Emma.
full time.
Amazing. Okay, so thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. So first off, I want to start us off by a bit of a reaction to the statistics that I mentioned earlier. So it's very evident that statistically women are much more likely to be affected by mental health issues. Why do you think that this is the case? Leah, I want to hear from you first.
Totally. I do believe there are many, many factors. Something that we really need to consider is the changes happening from COVID to now. But biologically, women are kind of more susceptible because the way our brain is wired in a way. We are more empathic. Have much more emotional understanding, and that may, although it's very, very positive, it's also a bit of our downfall in how it affects us.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, since we're very thoughtful, we may end up in ruminating, repeatedly thinking of the same scenario. One thing, and I think with the media use, and this is a really good thing that we're using media, because most of the time it's used in a inappropriately or wrongly. There are so many societal standards for women. It's ridiculous. We compare each other. We literally, there's these challenges to lose weight, these filters that are constantly being updated and literally reform your face.
Yeah.
And apart from that, there's also the gender issues between men and women. Unfortunately, in regards to men, they do stay more silent. So one of the factors that it shows, women talk about themselves more. They open up more. They seek help more.
Yeah.
So statistically, men sometimes have less of a percentage because they don't reach out.
Yeah, they don't
So
seek
those are
help.
the people we know about.
Yeah.
So the statistics are always based on, these are the ones that have actually spoken out, the ones we know. There is also the percentage of the people we don't know. Apart from that, there's also high susceptibility for physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Around 1 in 4 women are actually experience some form of abuse, especially in partner relationship abuse. I myself, unfortunately, experienced an abusive relationship, and that obviously affected my mental health. But I think we're just really thoughtful people. We always try to help. We always try to think about each other, and that even Maltese culture, I think the mother figure, the mother role at the household, the housewife, it's
Yeah.
always just, she needs to take care of every single person, clean everything, like this standard. And now we're shifting to women at work and getting more present at work. So there's a change in the identity of what it means to be a woman, especially in the Maltese culture. And at the same time, it's like, where are my roots? Where do I stand? Where am I like this? Am I not a woman because I don't, clean the house often, or I'm splitting the roles? So there's a lot of changes, I think.
What if you could start your journey over? Start here and start again there. That's how life works, in a circular way. We understand the importance of circles, and that's why you are at the heart of ours. Find your way to wellness with Browns.
You mentioned like biology at a point, and I want to ask, like, women have different hormonal cycles than men do. Does that play a part?
Hormones for sure play a part for women. I mean, we all get our periods. Most of us do get our period every month. Recently, as in these last few years, the DSM-5. This is like a diagnostic manual they use in America. In Europe, we usually use the ISD. Cut that out because I forgot what it's called. But they've recently introduced premenstrual dysphoric disorder.
Yeah.
It's actually like recognized an actual disorder for people who experience very, very fluctuating and depressive moods a week before their period. So hormones for sure play a part. And even like you're constantly developing. And now there's also the introduction of the hormonal pill or contraceptives that most of us do tend to take. I mean, some of us don't take them as a birth control. We take them, for example, their dermatologist prescribes them, and they give it to me because of chronic acne, for example. So hormones do play a part, for sure.
Yeah, I think it would be a bit more complicated for women than in terms of mental health. I think it's a given that women are going to be more affected. I mean, as Leah said, even just biologically, I mean, you have the hormonal cycles where, there are some parts of the month where your estrogen levels are high or other levels are high. It's just, and then there's also the factor of, is it regular? Is it not regular? So there's a lot going on. I feel like, obviously, the difference in cycles, the fact that our cycle is based on, the usual 28 hormonal cycle and men's is completely different, just makes, that's already a very big difference. And I think, adding on to what she said, was socially, I think we've got a lot of like situations where we are just, I would say, vulnerable compared to men. Something as simple as, well, it should be simple, walking at night and, walking alone at night. Something I genuinely do not do personally. I have a dog. I don't take him out in the evening. If ever.
Don't feel like you could be safe?
No, definitely not. I have this like alarm on my car keys, which I carry around with me everywhere. So if God forbid something had to happen, depending on my fight or flight response, I will click that alarm and hopefully someone will help. But I feel like we're definitely more vulnerable. I'm not saying that men aren't. It's just, given certain social constructs, I think women have it a little bit harder in certain situations.
Okay,
sure.
all right. And Emma, what do you think? Like, adding on to what they said and also like your own reaction to the statistics.
I think they make sense, but I also don't want to exclude the fact that maybe men don't reach out as women.
Yeah.
So maybe I don't know therapy-wise how many men versus women go to therapy, if there is a statistic, because I think that affects everything. If women reach out more than men, then of course they're gonna get diagnosed more than men.
I think it depends really, because I don't know about the statistics of how much men actually do reach out, but what we do notice is that I'm always going to speak in regards to the Maltese culture, because the Maltese culture is, it's very beautiful, but at the same time it can be a bit antiquated, and we do really take our time to adapt and resettle new ideas. And mental health is one of those things that still, it hasn't even reached the top of the mountain to actually be spoken about or considered. So I do think men in that sense, I don't know, I'm just going to switch to Maltese. Many people, like, if a man speaks up and says, oh, I'm feeling like this,
Like they have all these expectations to be
there's so many
manly.
expectations. And at the same time, when a woman is emotional,
And women are often called sensitive as
and
well.
sensitive, and
Yeah.
that is part of our nature. It is we are sensitive. It's important to be sensitive.
Yeah.
We sense each other more than men do most of the time. It's that sensitivity that differs and brings us more forward to show that, hey, listen, our qualities matter and their qualities matter. The difference is, with this fast-paced environment that we have, we don't even have a chance to actually see, like, oh, how am I feeling today? It doesn't matter. I just need to keep going on the next thing and next thing and next thing. Most of the time, people don't even ask you, how are you? They say, what are you doing right now? Where are you working? It's always focused on how active you really are, rather than how are you feeling?
Yeah.
What's happened to you? How are you doing today? What's going on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of focus on like the external. So like people tend to forget that just because you're doing things out there and they see you functioning on a daily and whatnot, doesn't mean that you don't have your own struggles.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
I think that's definitely a big thing with both men and women. Don't get me wrong.
And in fact, like even with, for example, certain cases of like celebrity suicides, it's the ones that
Yeah.
appear as if they have it most together that actually then would have like very either bad mental health or they would be struggling in silence, like they wouldn't have that support. Do you think the approach to mental health has improved in Malta? Because like when I look back to, for example, my parents' times, like when I look at my father, like men were always expected, you know, like men don't cry, you know, like
Go to work. You're not
and
working
and
at
with regards to women as well, like do you think, at least obviously that we're always going to have a long way to go, but do you think that it has improved?
What I've seen from experience, when I started therapy in the beginning, it was still you go to therapy, but nowadays I've been very spoken about it, and I've seen the difference. I've seen people randomly talking to me and saying, yes, I go to therapy as well. Like, yes, good for you, good for you. So I think we're getting more conscious about taking care of ourselves.
Yeah.
For sure. I think there's this idea, before it was this idea, like even I think like the older generation, it's like if you go to therapy, oh, you're crazy. مجنون، عندك شي حاجة. باللي
Yes.
no, you could have go to therapy and just need to talk about your life. Maybe I always picture therapy as this really big ball of string. And when you go to therapy, your therapist just helps you pick out each string separately. And most of the time, you need to go and do the work. It's not like going to the doctor and be like, hey, I'm hurting here. I have something here. What can I do? No, you need to put in the work. And I think a lot of people right now are realizing that they're ready to actually work. Most of the time, we just put it away. We shove it under the carpet. We close the door. Everything's fine, and we keep on going. And in Malta, there's a lot of transgenerational trauma in that sense. And we can't even blame our parents, because they did the best with what they knew how. And their parents did the same thing, but we don't realize how much from our ancestors is still being passed on and still affecting us to this day.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I feel like this transgenerational trauma, which keeps going down from one generation to another, I feel like, especially in Gen Z, there's this sort of awareness, which maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like in the past, maybe the awareness wasn't as much as it is now, or maybe people didn't talk about it rather. Like I feel
mean-
like people are more emotionally aware now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely social media like amped up the awareness.
Yes,
And
for sure.
COVID.
And COVID as
Yes.
well.
COVID
Like COVID,
really
yeah.
made people realize, hey, listen, it could be you, it could
Yeah.
be anyone. Like the statistics, like basic statistics is 1 in 4 people. With COVID, I'm sure it increased to much more.
And people had to go inward as well during that time.
Exactly.
Because
I mean,
we were,
solitude. I mean, no, we are not, as human beings, we're not made to be alone.
Yeah.
And that was a really big test to like, oh, you have to be with your own thoughts. This culture, and this is why I emphasize, like, we're so rushed. And this rush actually does not let us be present and think, what is going on? What am I doing? I always need to keep on going. And there's no time to think, no time to actually feel.
Yeah.
You just need to keep going because that's what is expected of you.
Yeah.
And I feel like with COVID, the fact that like the whole world was basically going through the same thing, there was that certain like relatability. So for once, people felt more comfortable to just say like, hey, I'm not okay. So if it was a question of I'm not okay because I'm alone and I know you're feeling it too because it's COVID, that's one thing. But
all
in
in the
general,
same boat.
people just became, people, we're all on the same boat. So
Yeah.
people became more aware. And I feel like in our Gen Z are very like, this transgenerational trauma you mentioned, it made me remember, like I see, sometimes I'll be like browsing through TikTok or social media in general, and like you get people talking about how therapy has helped them broken patterns.
Break the cycle.
Yeah, like you break
It
that.
was trending at one point.
Yeah.
Yes, it really was.
It
Like,
was trending. So like it was all the time like, oh, you have to do this. And there's a lot of awareness about this. Like even when you say transgeneration trauma, what is that?
Yeah.
When you say, what is that? What,
lot to
what did my
unpack,
grandma
right?
do? You know, at the same time. And it's so subtle. It can be really, really subtle. It's just passed on. And
Yeah.
you don't even know it because it's ingrained in you.
Yeah.
And to break it's a
So
lot of work.
This celebration is about those who come next, building on dreams and foundations. You get the context. For our people, our movement, not lost, but living, searching for a future filled with living, loving, and giving. Doesn't have to be about the great, the big, and the mighty. It can be about taking those small acts of kindness just a little less lightly. Making the most of our bodies, being thankful for each new day. The next 15 years is about the new creators, thinkers, movers, and shakers. But we need a helping hand. Are there any takers?
I want to move on a bit into like some personal experiences. Obviously, like whoever would like to share, I would like to start with you if you'd like.
All right.
Do you have any personal experiences which you'd like to share today to perhaps continue raising awareness?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure which one I should start with.
Whatever you want. Whatever you
Well,
want.
I went into Mount Carmel in 14th February of last year, in Valentine's Day.
Oh wow.
Yes. And first impressions of Mount Carmel. The transit word, because of COVID, there was this transit word.
Still there.
Still there?
Still there.
Still, wow. And it's a very cold and dark place. And the first impressions, you don't know what you're gonna expect. You've heard about Mount Carmel, about this haunting place, and you don't know what's going to happen, what's the truth, what's not. And when I entered, they take your stuff, they take your belt, they take your keys, your cards, your phone, and you just have to give up everything just like that, and you have to accept and just nod. I was hysterically crying, and then the transit ward, that's where all the patients go in at first glance.
They need to do the COVID test
Yep.
until they see if you're positive or not. So for you to be moved into another ward.
Yeah.
So there I stayed for a few hours first time. Then we went to admission ward 3, and admission ward 3 was completely different atmosphere, different scenario, different stuff. The stuff was very nice. The walls were colored. There were posters. There were motivational quotes on top of the wall, and it was completely different than what I've heard about Mount Carmel. I don't want to romanticize it, because it's still Mount Carmel. It's still a very old place, but the nurses, they are very nice. They are very helpful. They make you feel home. And I remember the first time that I went to Admission Ward 3, I was crying all time. I felt like a little kid. Like I had nothing on me. I was still wearing my PJs. And when I saw all the people, because at Mission Ward 3, I think it was a full house. I think around 28,
Oh, wow.
28
It was at full
patients.
capacity.
Yes. And the first thing that I did, I went running under the table just like a little kid. And I started crying there. But then eventually I warmed up to the place.
And did you find like support? Like, did you feel that you could have help there?
Yes and no, because in Mount Carmel, even then, when you meet the doctors, there are 5 people in front of you.
Wow.
It's normally like, because the thing is, a lot of in Malta we use the practice to teach the doctors who are students or still becoming is the specialization. So you have the consultant, and under the firm we have all these people trying to learn, but at the same time
It's
the
very
priorities for
intimidating.
you, it's very overwhelming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, who are you? Don't know them. You don't know them.
Yeah.
You've never met them before, and suddenly you have 5 people like trying to medicalize you. Or
And it's already hard enough to open yourself up to one stranger, let alone 5.
It's like you have an
Exactly.
audience in front of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to go through that.
Yes.
Sounds intense.
Yes. But they give you these lectures of what you need to do, what to get better. So, for example, you make a list of the things that will help you when you get a panic attack, for example. So, number 1 would be going for a walk. Number 2 would be listening to music. Number 3 would be drawing. But when I had a panic attack there, I couldn't go outside because the doors are locked.
Yeah.
It's suffocating.
Yeah.
You can't use your skills to get better. It's just a transit place where the world just stops without you, and you are expected to get better, but at the same time you can't get better. So it's very daunting, and
Yeah. Like, it's too detached from the real world for it to
Yes.
actually be realistic.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And you mentioned drawing before.
Yes.
And so I'm particularly inspired by the way that you've used your art and illustrations to cope with your experiences. And I know recently you were also of an exhibition.
Yes, and I'm planning for another one as well.
Amazing, amazing.
August.
So can you tell me a bit, like, how has your art and social media presence become powerful outlets for coping and raising awareness for yourself?
I started drawing seriously again because I studied art, but I stopped doing the traditional things. I started in 2019. I remember the day exactly. I had a very bad panic attack, and I just went out in Valletta, brought a sketchbook, and started drawing. And from then, I didn't stop. And Mount Carmel, all I did was draw because there is nothing else to do.
Yes, unfortunately.
There is nothing else to do. So I was very inspired to draw. My art is considered more as an outsider art rather than art for art's sake, because I don't create it to be seen. I create it for the process, for the healing process, for the art therapy.
That's beautiful.
So it's not meant to be shown, but then again, showing it makes me feel empowered, and people relate to it somehow. It's
I mean, it
weird.
is a form of therapy. It
Yeah.
is a form of therapy in a way.
Yeah.
There is many forms of therapy. That's the beautiful thing, because there's so many different types of therapy, and until you find the one that fits you and the one that helps you, and then this way you were therapeutically helping yourself in that
Exactly.
sense. That's really, really great.
Yeah.
And you could find that support like for yourself, and like, you know, like you have a form of release, and you can actually use it at whatever time you want. And it's very intimate in a way, right?
It is very intimate because you don't do it. It's not socially acceptable in a sense, but then again, it's you go inside in a room and you just build your own aura and you just draw your own world. You don't have to think, you don't have to explain, you just draw. And that helped me, especially with the rape, where I felt so alone. I couldn't relate to anyone. There is no support group in Malta where people can talk about these things, and art helped me to share my story, to raise awareness about the subject, about and fighting for my justice ultimately, because if I don't fight, I've lost the battle and I'm not ready to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever the outcome is, just know that like you are inspiring so many people out there.
Exactly.
I have no doubt. Honestly, whatever the outcome is, the fact that you decided to report, you decided to take that fight, I think that's something that a lot of people wouldn't do, even if they've gone through
I think it was I had to report, because if I didn't report, he was working in Mount Carmel. So even the fact that he was working in Mount Carmel, he's the night carer, makes the place even more haunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were in Mount Carmel after the rape happened?
Yes. I met him on my admission two, and then after that, all 4 admissions were because of the rape,
Okay.
because of the panic attacks and the PTSD. It was very bad. The longest I did was 1 month inside, and that was the last admission, where I was also transferred to a short stay in Gozo. So now my care is in Gozo, which is different in a sense that in Gozo, the short stay, the Mount Carmel in Gozo, is very clinical. It's very clean. It's it's very hospital feel. It's part of the hospital, so it's literally a hospital. But it's different in Mount Carmel. There's more a sense of a community. You get to know the people. You get to know the staff.
There's more of a rehabilitative sense.
Yes. In Gozo, not so much.
It's very interesting because between Malta and Gozo, even though we're so close, like 30-minute boat ride, you can know that.
Yeah.
It's
You
like,
got it in resident.
it's so close, and at the same time, in Malta we're behind, but in Gozo we're even more behind when it comes to mental health, and it's really, really worrying, and it's concerning that just the small little island that's literally so close to us can have such a big difference still, and for us to apply that there, it's very interesting. And I know a lot of people from Gozo, and I know a lot of people who unfortunately experience problems with their mental health, and they do try the best they can because they do have a sense of community. But at the same time, when it comes to this subject, it's still very difficult to talk about and to bring on the table, to say, I'm not feeling so good. Because there's still, I think, I'm not saying anything against Go, so I love you guys. But still think like there's this gradual and very slow progression.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it feels like Malta of like 10 years ago.
I think even more
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Even more sometimes.
Something about the way you bounce makes me want to keep you around my mind. My mind. Something about the way you sound shakes me up and makes me
I want to move on to you, Tiffany. Like, I want to see if you have any personal experiences that you'd like to share. And I've also noticed, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you on this show, is that like you've similarly been raising awareness on social media recently,
Yeah.
especially on the side effects brought on by benzo use. So
Yeah.
you were first prescribed the drug at the tender age of 14 years old, right? And
Yes.
you're currently in the process of getting off of them after 11 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's your experience been like with that?
Oh God. It's been life-changing in one word. I mean, it's been quite the process. I mean, getting on the meds, I was just a child. I was 14. I was a minor. So certain decisions I couldn't even make myself. And even if I could, I was too young to even understand certain things. But I do remember opening up to my parents, telling them, listen, I'm struggling. In fact, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was the statistics with regards to self-harm. I was surprised it's that high. Because 10 years ago, when I was 14, because I'm 24 now, I think I was the only one in my school doing it. I could be wrong, but let's just say I felt like I was the only one. I had bandages, I would cover them up, and it was very difficult socially. And then apart from that, I had to be put on a lot of medication. And the doctor who put me on this medication, whatever the intention was, I just don't agree that a 14-year-old or anyone of any age should be put on so much medication. I was put on antidepressants, I was put on benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, and I was taking about 2.5 to 3 sleeping pills a day. I was a walking zombie. I don't even remember that part of my life, to be honest. It's like
a
more
blur, really.
flashbacks. Yeah, like it's quite a blur. I think it's just the narrative that keeps it alive to me, because I was on so many meds at the time that like I think it's normal that I would forget. But just to cut like a really long story short, about 3 or 4 years after I started taking them, so I was around 17, 18, I started thinking, do I really need these meds? Like, okay, I was still not mentally fully stable, as in the way I would react to things. I had a lot of rage in me and whatnot, but I felt like all that medication was a bit unnecessary. And I remember confronting this very doctor, and he kept telling me, oh, I know you the most. I know that you need them. If there's anyone that you should trust, it should be me. So I kept trusting this doctor until eventually I thought, this is not going to take me anywhere good. And I kept changing doctors from then. I kept changing psychiatrists. I went to therapy. It was just a long battle, because I was trying to better myself, because I had my own traumas. I've had my fair share of traumas. So I wanted to work on that. So at that age, I put the meds on the side for quite a long time. And I just kept taking them because it became such a routine. Morning, afternoon, evening, same
It was
thing.
normal to you, like?
Yes, completely. Like the
You
same
have to
way.
take them every day.
Yeah.
And at the same time. You have
Exactly. I have to. Like, if I've never missed a dose in my life. And it's sad to say my life, because it's literally been like the most part of my
You're
life.
so young still.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're still very young.
I'm only 24, and like the fact that I don't know what my normal body, like I don't know the way my body would function normally without the drugs, you know? And it's sad to say, because I was very scared that like getting off the meds would reveal a different personality, a different Tiffany. Like, who is Tiffany without the meds?
Yeah.
Essentially, I went on them when, puberty hit. 14 is young.
Such a transformative time of our lives as
Exactly. So at 14, my body was developing. I was developing mentally. I was starting to grow up. But then the meds kind of like dulled everything down. So now I'm at a point where I made the decision 2 years ago that I want to get off them. Because
well.
it was
slow process, I imagine.
Yes, it's very. And there are a lot of, apart from side effects, there are a lot of consequences. So me making decision to get off the meds, I always wanted to get off them. It was more of like, okay, Tiff, should you stay on them so you don't risk withdrawals and fatalities? Or should you get off them, risk it all, but then possibly have a brighter future, a healthier future. And I chose that. It took me a year just to make the decision. And I spoke to the psychiatrist that I'm going to now. It's not the first one, just to clarify. And he is so supportive. I spoke to him and he looked into different ways of tapering, we call it, which is reducing the meds.
Yeah.
We looked into different tapering methods. I explained to him what I would think is the best option for me. He looked into it, he confirmed it, and the ball started rolling from there 6-7 months ago.
And what's the timeline looking like? At which point do you think you'll be completely off of them?
That's the big question. I mean, a rough estimate, okay, I started getting off them in December.
Okay.
So it, again, like we're saying, it's very gradual because of withdrawals. As it's looking now, I'm almost halfway through. But the closer you get to the end, the more intense the withdrawals are.
Definitely.
It's like my last reduction was I already had some symptoms I've never experienced before, like random loss of vision. Apparently it's normal.
Oh, wow.
Who's going to tell you this stuff? I got to know all this stuff about long-term benzo use and the effects that it can cause through online groups on Facebook with essentially older people who have been on it for 20, 30 years and are now at 60, 70 years old realizing the effects. I don't know anyone my age globally who is going through this, let alone in Malta. So I can't even speak for Malta. I'm speaking globally. This is a very, very, very tiny niche.
Yeah.
The fact that my psychiatrist had to, for example, go into this Ashton manual, we call it, the tapering method, the fact that he had to verify it and see that it's legit says a lot. I feel like a lot of psychiatrists know how to prescribe. Even GPs prescribe benzos at this point. I know so many people who say, oh, my GP gave me a 10-day course.
That's really bad.
And it's so bad. Biologically, I had to learn how these things
Irks
work.
me so much.
Yes. And I've gotten so many friends who have gone through it, and
As in,
it
to a
is very
certain
frustrating.
extent, yes, they may prescribe certain medication,
Yeah.
but given that they don't have the specialization,
Yeah,
they have not
exactly.
studied enough about it. You should not be in a place. You should be in a place where, listen, I may know about this medication, but I'm not a psychiatrist.
Yes.
I've experienced it, yes, given the medication that my GP had given me was the same my second psychiatrist gave me, but still, the initial was, listen, I need a psychiatrist, someone who has studied thoroughly about psychiatric medication. And still in Malta, we do still have the idea, but even in I'm going to mention culture again, but in the people within the community, a lot of people, I'll go to the doctor, alright. It's not the same with mental health. You just pop some pills and we're going to be fine. You need to do the work.
Yeah, and it has to be a combination of meds and therapy. I feel like people either go to just therapy, which is completely fine. But what I completely disagree with is just taking meds. If you're going to take medication, go to therapy as well. They have to
And
work
you need
hand
to
in
lead
hand.
a healthy life.
Yeah.
Apart from that,
Yes.
you need to be,
Yeah.
because if you're going to therapy and you're going to take the meds, and then in your day-to-day life, you're not doing anything that benefits you, you're not working on yourself, you're not reflecting, then what's the point?
Yeah, there's a lot of active effort that needs to be put into it.
It's literally needs to be one of your primary focuses.
It's a whole lifestyle, really,
It
right?
is, it is. It's
Food,
habitual. It needs to be
exercise, sleep,
habitual. Yes.
these things all play a part in our lives. And I think as well, you mentioned it before, we're living a very fast life, and that sometimes makes us forget
Completely.
the basics. These are the basics.
I'll be honest, when you asked me what's it been like for you, and I told you it's been life-changing, it really has. The fact that I had to stop work, so I lost that routine, the daily hustle and bustle, it used to be so busy for me, I would forget about myself. I don't have work right now. I am studying a master's online because I felt like going abroad would be a risk. So, I mean, Malta's small, let's face it, if God forbid something had to happen, I could go to Mater Dei in minutes,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to wait hours.
And at least you have the free healthcare as well. So
That
if
too.
something does happen, at least you're covered
Yes.
by that.
And I've gone to the ER multiple times. It's
Can I
sad
ask
to
a
say.
bit? Are there certain withdrawal symptoms that might actually throw you in hospital?
Yes.
Like
yes. Or most of them, honestly. fortunately and unfortunately, I've learned how to handle them. So, for example, back in 2020, I tried reducing benzos, but I wasn't using the tapering method that I'm using now. So looking back, I'm realizing that I tapered way too much back then. Like I could have died essentially. I got around 25 seizures in
wow.
in 3 months. Yes, it was like even just saying it out loud, I can't even believe it myself because I became so used to them. Like I would make a reduction and then a few days later I get a seizure. The day after a seizure. So it was literally like 10 days of seizures. I did this 3 times. So we're talking 25 to 30 seizures in a summer.
I just
It
got
was very
goosebumps.
intense.
Wow.
It was so intense. But like I remember going up to my psychiatrist. I told him, I know you're trying to help, but listen, I'm scared I'm going to go into like cardiac arrest, man, with all these seizures. I mean, my nervous system is in overdrive every time.
Yeah, yeah.
So this was with your new psychiatrist that you were getting the seizures still, or when you were
Yes.
doing it on your own?
Yes.
Oh, with the new psychiatrist.
With the new psychiatrist.
So you're
But-
still being monitored. You're being monitored and you're doing it properly, and you still get of course.
But now, thankfully, I haven't had seizures, thankfully.
Thank God.
Because we're using a very gradual tapering method. We're when I say we, I mean me, my doctor, and my support system. We are very aware of how the method is. We know what it's like, when to make a reduction. I know my body more than anyone else. You know, like I've gotten neurologists diagnose me with the most absurd things, and I tell them it's my benzos. Thank you, but no thank you. Like that is what I find in terms of mental health in Malta. This is what I find very frustrating. I have found myself in so many situations where I have to be the one educating doctors.
Yeah.
It is very, very frustrating. And I'm not talking just like, I mean, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a psychiatrist, a neurologist, people at Mater Dei, it's so frustrating to have to teach them. And then they hit me with, mela inti tabiba. I'm like,
And before you mentioned as well that you were getting most of the information that helped you from support groups online,
All of
not
it.
from your doctors, right?
all of it. Like my boyfriend thankfully found a forum it's been over a year now, and he told me join it, see it. It's called Benzo Buddies. For anyone out there, like. But it's like even that, the website is so old school because the people running it are older.
Yeah.
But then I started looking on Facebook myself. I found these groups and I have chats. We have Zoom sessions, which are weekly. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. But I don't
That's
know anyone
good,
in
huh?
Malta going
Yeah.
through this.
No.
So
I know people around much older who are on benzodiazepines. Unfortunately, like those who are younger, still not sure, have been switched to more modern medication because we have been medication has been updated to a certain extent
Yes.
where we're using modern medications. So, but still, the process from changing one medication to another, it's still a lengthy process. Still,
Yeah.
I had to change mine before I started tapering. I had to change brand because
Yeah.
the one I was taking before was too hard to get off from. Like now I'm at a point where in 2 reductions, I'm going to have to start using a scale, which is
wow.
like so alien to me. I'm like,
Because it needs to be so precise.
yes, down to like 0.00 something.
Wow. Wow.
So it's quite a process.
Leah.
yes. So, I've had my personal struggles with mental health. When I was I was always a bit of an anxious child myself. But when I was younger, I did go through depression around 14. And I want to mention this, that around, I believe, there's this statistic, like around half of all people who are diagnosed with mental health around 14 and over. Most of the time get diagnosed. So at the age of 14, it starts to come out. Obviously, puberty, there are many factors, transitioning, changing schools and stuff like that. With my own personal experience, I'm actually diagnosed with OCD. It's an anxiety disorder. A lot of people, when they hear OCD, oh, she's a clean freak or she's like that. It's not necessarily the case, but
Misconception, eh?
there's a lot of misconception. And one thing that, oh my God, I cannot stand for the life of me when something happens, like, oh, I'm so OCD. Like,
People throw out these things so
It's
fast.
like, or for example, I heard last time I don't watch it. I'm with all due respect, but on Loving in Malta. Oh, sorry, not Love in Malta. Sorry, on Love Island. I wanted to say on Love Island. Someone called someone, "Oh, you're so bipolar." And we can still
Yeah.
keep using this, but in regards to my experience, yes, I was in a very abusive relationship that ended during COVID. But then, exactly when I got my freedom, COVID lockdown came in. So I was like, oh,
It's
reflections.
a new challenge.
Yes, it was a new challenge, but I really thank COVID because it really gave me that time to be with myself and say, oh, I cannot go through this anymore. And having been in that abusive relationship, I realized I need to change. There are so many things. I need to change the standards of my life for me to have settled for that relationship. Today I'm much better. I still have my struggles. To be honest, at the end of last year, I felt like I was going through a depressive phase again, and I needed to seek out help. Unfortunately, the person I seeked help from, who's a psychiatrist, I was quite blinded, and I'm very, very meticulous on who I choose, and I do my research, but I was really, really desperate to be seen. I was prescribed medication at 14 that turned me into a zombie, like you said. I was an absolute mess. I mean, you and me were in secondary school. I used to skip school all the time. I used to have
Yeah.
side effects at
That
school.
happened to me as well.
My stomach was terrible. I couldn't. I used to shake, like I once remember at school, I was sent by an ambulance to the hospital, and it was just really, really bad panic attack. But I thought that panic attacks actually resemble like heart attack. They're the same symptoms, so you really do feel like as if you're having a heart attack. Studies show.
Experience too.
And right now, I'm really working on it. I mean, the studying psychology really, really opened my eyes. It's like one of those courses where you're not just studying; you really have to go in deep. Everything's a trigger. Everything's going to be like, oh my god, what am I learning? Then I have to be assessed about this, or there's an exam. But now I'm doing much better. I've changed psychiatrists. The person I'm seeing now is very, very supportive of my journey. I am on medication as well. I do wish I'm not on medication, to be truthful, but it is part of the process.
Yeah.
It is part you have to go through. And now working in the sector like full time, and going to my psychiatrist myself and being in the chair, I'm like, oh my god, I'm on the other side right now. And that's okay. Like my first psychiatrist, he actually made fun of me because he was like, I was doing TMS therapy. It's like a transcranial magnetic stimulation. And there's this big business going on in this private setting, and unfortunately not many people know it's offered for free. You can get a referral and you can get the treatment for free at Mount Carmel. So you may hear like, I was told that it can fry my brain, I'll turn to toast and stuff like that. And the psychiatrist I'm seeing now, he's like, no way. So I'm actually going to start that treatment properly and at Mount Carmel, I'll see that. But I want to urge the public to know there's this free service that you can do, because it's very, very expensive in the private.
Yeah. So you've mentioned Mount Carmel again, and we already had Emma talking about it. And as someone who works as a mental health recovery officer, you've had your fair share of actually working at Mount Carmel, right?
I most of the time I do accompany some of my clients when they have their psychiatric reviews. If their psychiatrists are still at Mount Carmel, naturally, if you have clients who have been admitted, I do go visit them. I've never been admitted myself, thankfully, and I'm very glad so far. But yes, I have seen Mount Carmel on the inside.
And what are your thoughts about it? Like, as someone who has both experienced struggles with mental health and as someone who also works within the sector, so you've pretty much like seen both ends of the spectrum.
It depends on which area on Mount Carmel, because they've a few years ago they opened the halfway house, and it's a really, really well renovated house. It's very up to date. It's very beautiful. It's very therapeutic, and that's exactly when you go in. when you go into Mount Carmel, I mean, Mount Carmel was built like 162 years ago. We're talking over like a century. Like I think it was built like in 1861. And the fact that it's still up and running. And like as you said, it's so old and it's so haunting because one thing that really I do not like, because okay, it's what we have. Fair enough. It's what we have and it's what we can make do of. But as soon as you go into Mount Carmel, the first thing you see outside before you get into those gates is asylum for the insane. Sorry. And the fact that this is still an up and running hospital, and to this day, we've moved so far from institutionalization to rehabilitation, and the fact there's institution, asylum for the insane. Like, and you get so frustrated because when you try to fight about, like, listen, all you need to do is remove it. Just, I don't know. I would get a sculptor myself and I'd go scratch it out if I could.
Yeah.
But I mean, that would be damage to property. I'm not I'm not into that right now. I mean, my opinion with Mount Carmel and the staff, I do feel the staff are burnt out to a certain extent, given the circumstances of the state. And obviously, you're working in mental health, not because, let's forget the resources, you're working in mental health. It's going to affect you. You see some of the worst people in a way that in their worst moments. And that is so difficult. I'm not worst people, I'm saying in their worst moments.
Yeah.
And that can always affect you in some way. But I do believe that most of the staff at Mount Carmel are doing the best with what they have.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, most of the people, I cannot generalize. Obviously, you're going to have those one-offs where they're not good people, and that is very sad, and we find them everywhere. But when we're talking to mental health and we're talking about rehabilitation, we do need a new hospital. We do, and the fact that most of it is being closed off, so there's construction going on, there's works going on. That's not really therapeutic. I don't know. I live in Malta, and as in all of you do. Everyone is affected by construction, let alone in a very rehabilitative place where you're supposed to get better.
It's supposed to be peaceful, eh?
It's supposed to be, and it's really sad because the area is actually really, really beautiful. There's a lot of gardens that you can, they had the time to renovate it, but at the same time, where are you going to put the people there? And they keep saying, oh, a new hospital. Ideally, we would have a hospital near Mater Dei.
Yeah.
Because we need to reconnect the idea that it's not just medical. We can't look at mental health from the medicine aspect. We cannot anymore. We need to look at the therapeutic aspect. We need to reconnect the mind and the body and really, really conform them together and look at them together rather than just, oh, I'm going to give you some medication because I know that medication is going to do this. No, you need to, it's a trial and error process. And that's why a lot of people give up or are scared to go Mount Carmel. I mean, even in Malta, we say, like even the story about Franconi, as in, it's the first actual mental hospital, so to speak, was in Floriana. And it was after Franconi, who was a cavalier. And the story of how they ended up in Mount Carmel at Tattard, it was at the middle of the night, they tied all the patients to their beds and some of them in cages, and they walked it from Floriana to Attard. Because back in the day, Attard was like in the middle of nowhere. There was fields. Even like when you go to Mount Carmel, it's quite a long road. There it was all fields before.
In fact, it's still all cut off, like to this day. Like
it's
it's
still
not
very cut off. It's still very,
like
very
there
cut
aren't
off.
any houses next to it. Like
No.
or right now there's like a
Century
main road, but
Sorry.
all of you, I think, have spoken in some way or another about your mental health on social media. And I want to ask you first, Emma. Do you find talking about your mental health beneficial or detrimental to your health? Like, have there been any instances where it was actually harmful?
If I'm being truthful, yes. Because being out there and talking out loud on what you're going through is going to make some people talk, and the talking might not be as beneficial as it should be. But also, it's not just the people, it's also talking to, you both mentioned the psychiatrist, finding the right doctor. I had one doctor saying, the first doctors I went to, he said, I don't know what's wrong with you. You seem fine to me. I don't know why you're depressed. You seem okay. And
It's kind of very invalidating, I feel.
Yeah.
especially
You kind of
from a
want to be heard.
psychiatrist.
Yeah, you
especially
want to be
from-
heard in an appointment, not be told these things.
Exactly, exactly. So all these remarks, they've sent me back to Mount Carmel, unfortunately. But also, talking out loud about it has also helped me open up and finding support ultimately, because there are so many people that support me at this time that I don't even know, but they reach out and they help without their knowledge, maybe because it's just one really short message, but every little thing counts.
And have you ever had instances where people actually felt comfortable opening up to you because you've been
Yes.
vocal?
Yes, yes. And that's very therapeutic, even for myself, because we find each other in a sense that we're connecting. So there is this relationship, even though we don't need to keep talking about it, but there's still you know that you're not alone, and that's enough.
Amazing. And Leah,
Yes.
like, I want to hear your thoughts about it. Also, as someone who works within the sector, like, and even you, Tiffany, will get to you soon. Could raising awareness ever become detrimental to whoever is speaking out?
I think yes, because we all know the good and the bad of social media. And from my aspect, like I really want to be more vocal and I really want to bring more awareness because I feel like I have the information and the research. I'm very research based as a person. I try to be at least. But I feel alla fin säger de stå sig seconda. Sorry. Yeah, detrimental.
Yeah.
I do think it's a very annoying question to a certain extent, Sash. because-
sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's an annoying question in the sense that yes, it can be very detrimental because at the same time, you don't know who's listening. I mean, even when you invited me to be on this podcast, I was like, oh my God, how personal am I gonna get? What am I gonna say? What am I comfortable to say? Because what I may be vocal about what I'm comfortable with may not actually necessarily radiate or be understood in the same way I'm trying to get the point across.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, already, kan jag ta få en fissa och för men done. There is so much good in reaching out. I remember when I was experiences and I was at my lowest, I felt like I had absolutely no one to relate to. I did not know where to go. I could feel like, oh my God, I am so alone in this. I don't know what to do. So I vowed to myself to a certain extent, like I'm very open about my experience because I've dealt with it. I've made peace with most of it. I'm still making peace with some things, but I made peace with most of it. But at the same time, yes, you need to be very, very careful. Unfortunately, there are cruel people. There are people who enjoy or take some sort of gratification for making you feel worse about your experience, or they invalidate, or they feel like their opinion somehow is they take it personally. And I find that so and like that says more about you if you're taking it personally, but that's okay. I think there needs to be a lot more laws and a lot more regulation. And I do respect you because you're my friend and you're a journalist, but I'm speaking in general that I do feel there are so many articles sometimes and they are handled so inappropriately without the consideration of how many people it can affect, even with graphic images or certain details or the information of certain people. I think and it's not about like the news outlets, because at the end of the day, it's not really your fault, but it's like the higher order that needs
Exactly.
to regulate you. And I've unfortunately had people who found out, for example, the death of a loved one through social media. And imagine finding your father has passed away from the news rather than being informed first. There needs to be some form of leeway, like at least a respectable time before it's out there on the media. And when a person uses their own experience on the media, I think they need to be very, very cautious. Especially, for example, everyone has a right to their own cell phone. But at the same time, for example, within the disability, you need to consider the amount of insight or the amount of what actually is out there on social media, because a lot of people are bullied, and unfortunately we've had clients who were bullied on social media, and it's very, very saddening. It's really like, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting, because you try to do something good, you speak about your experience, and then at the end you have people still telling you how bad it is and how you should have not done that. It's like, why? So it's a bit of a سكينة اللي تقطع من جيش نهات.
Eżatt.
Yeah, I think it's conflicting.
Yeah, Tiffany, would you like to add on something else?
I think, I mean, like from personal experience, I feel like I've always been somewhat open on social media. Now maybe I've been a little bit more open because I opened up about this whole Benzo journey. And I would say this is the most open I've been on social media. And I personally am comfortable with it because, like Emma was saying, you know, sometimes people message and say, oh, I'm going through something. Okay, in my case, not the same thing, but something similar. Like they say, I'm trying to get off, for example, my antidepressants, or I would like to get off certain medication. Like, what helped you? Or listen, for example, someone messaged me just yesterday saying, listen, I'm going through, I'm currently facing a certain symptom. I'd rather not say, but it's a very difficult symptom. And this guy told me, listen, do you know anyone who's been through it? And I told him, I have. You know, so it can be very empowering knowing that you are helping people. And I think the best messages I've gotten, for example, are when people say, thank you for sharing this. Like, sometimes a simple thank you goes such a long way. Like, thank you for sharing. You have inspired me, or you are helping so many people without knowing, you know, like these things help. But there's that double-edged sword. Like Leah mentioned, I feel like there are instances where it does work against you. Personally speaking, from my experience, so far, so good. Touch wood. But like, I'm sure that there are people out there who see my posts, see my stories, and think, she's just looking for attention, or I don't
That's
know.
always
I
the
don't even
case
know
with
what they
mental
could
health.
think. Yes,
It's
with
always-
mental health, it's like I don't know how people could think these things, but I've heard things about me before I even opened up. So let alone now.
Very sorry.
It is what it is. I mean, I
but
know what
you
my
hear
truth
these
is.
things about you. You're going through a bad time, and at the same time, like,
Yeah.
do you really need to say certain comments? Like,
Yeah.
what's it to you? Like, if I'm going to share my story, yes, I'll share my story, but it's my story. Don't turn it into yours.
Yeah,
and
I
see
feel
how
like
you're going to play
I
with
feel like
it.
if you're going to be public about something, you kind of need to be prepared.
Yes.
It's sad to say, but yes, you do need to be prepared that you're going to get negative comments.
Yeah.
So I think there is a time and place for everything, because I've seen people who have opened up or tried to open up on social media, and you could see that they are not ready to. And I would just want to reach out to them and say, listen, can you take some time for yourself and, you know, heal a little bit more before you try to go public about it, because you're going to get one negative comment that's going to make you spiral.
And you open yourself up to a lot. Like, I
Yeah.
experience it as well because I've become more of a public person. But like, you are constantly under scrutiny. Like, you
Yes.
can do whatever and you'll always find someone to criticize you. So especially when you're opening up on something that's so personal to you, it can be quite difficult to actually deal with the reactions. Ladies, we are actually coming to a close. So
Goodness, already.
yes, so I am going to ask all of you, like, what are your closing thoughts and advice, and like, what's your message to people out there? Emma, you want to start?
I want to just say this little verse. This is hard, but you can do hard things. And that little comment and that little quote has gone. I've passed so many things with just that quote, and I think it is what it is. But eventually, we need to get help. We need to go to therapy, and there is nothing wrong with reaching out for help. You're just one call away, one message away from getting help, and it doesn't make you any less of a person for asking for help. We don't need to put more negative thoughts out there, negative feedback out there. There's already a lot out there. We just need to give a little love. That's it.
Oh,
Yes.
that's so beautiful. Thank you. Leah, what's your message?
I know it can be sound a little bit cliche, but you are not alone. There are so many people ready to hear your story, and if unfortunately you've met people who are not ready to hear it or shut the door in your face, like one of the mottos at work is if you don't get through the door, you get through the window.
Exactly.
And my dad or my father always added something that ياك مش من جو ياك ما تضيش من الباب قدم الدقيقة ياك ما مشيت ما تستطيعش تقدم الدقيقة كسر الحيط.
Exactly.
So there's always a way. My experience, it's trial and error, and don't give up. It does get better. It really, really does. Unfortunately, you really need to put the work in it, but you owe yourself and you need to honor yourself enough to get that help because you do deserve it, even though, and there are people listening. I mean, there's 1579, which is the health national health line now. There's 1770, there's Oli Chat, there's kalimni.com. There are people here ready to hear you out. No doubt. Your story deserves to be heard. And you don't need to go through this alone. You really do not.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Tiffany?
You should never rush. I think you should seek help if you need it. There's nothing wrong with seeking help. It doesn't make you weak. You are more than enough. I also think, as I said before, there is a time and place for everything. And what I mean by this is don't wait for yourself to spiral down before you reach help. I feel like that is something that happens a lot. Like, there is nothing wrong with going to therapy. There is nothing wrong with taking meds as long as things are done in moderation, things are done right, you're putting your effort into it. I think there's a lot that can be done. And if you're willing to help someone who came crying to you saying, listen, I'm sad, please help me, why wouldn't you do that to yourself? Like, this is something which I always say. If someone came to you with a problem, I feel like you would help them. So why don't we help ourselves the same way we help others?
Yeah. Like we totally deserve what we're ready to give others. Like, and sometimes we need that reminder.
For sure. Treat your mind as if you would treat a broken knee.
Exactly.
Literally.
If you had a
Exactly.
broken leg, you wouldn't be like, we'll get
Yeah.
better. I'll go to work. No, you need to treat your
Yeah.
mind and do take your rest days. If you're sick, and I mean not physically, mentally drained, you deserve to take your off days.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ladies, thank you all so much for joining today. I'm pretty confident that this discussion is going to help other women out there. And I'd like to thank you all for coming.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Thank you.
you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was a lovely discussion.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank
I
you.
love this,
you.
guys.